welcome Mr. Russell Pearce. Thanks, Russell. You want to use? Yeah, you're going to use this. She doesn't have you mic'd up, so good.
Wow, you know, I always appreciate coming here, and my only disappointment ever is the fact that most of us are close to my age. You know, we've got a country that we're eventually got to turn over to our children, and are they prepared? We lose in a tough time, and you know, we're going to talk a little bit about that. I'm lucky to stand here before you. I'll tell you a little bit about me. You know, I'm one of 13 children, a blended family. The most dangerous thing ever said in our family was amen, just before meal. And I can tell you, but we had a good time. We were poor. We lived, in fact, South McDonald. You know, everybody knows where South McDonald's at. Yeah, we lived in 7 different houses just on South McDonald. So moving wasn't a chore for us, though, because everything we owned we could get in the back seat of a car. But anyway, we moved a lot. We always tease about it. You know, one of the reasons I think is because my dad was very offended that actually asked for rent at the end of each month. And so anyway, we'd move. And we moved a lot. But I had a mom. I love my dad. But my dad had parenting challenges. You know, he was an alcoholic, and my mom raised him and us children. But I had a mom that was an angel. And as a result of that, you know, most of our kids, all of her kids, good kids. Because we knew right and wrong. We were taught the principles of character, personal responsibility. Again, poverty is something most of our children will never know, because we live in a society where our poor are better off than most folks. But we were extremely poor. We lived in travel trailers. We lived in a tent in the forest for several months. We've lived, you know, in poverty, but I never remember feeling poor, because I had a mom that always provided and loved us and took care of us. But I live at a time now where I worry about what's going on in our country. I mean, you take a young gal in Kentucky, Kim Davis, put in jail for standing up for her God-given rights. See, this was not, this is not a law. This was a judicial decree that was unconstitutional. Judge Scalia and Thomas and Judge Alito, or Roberts, made it very clear that this was judicial tyranny and robbed the states of their constitutional right, robbed them of the function of government or the proper role of our courts. It's a dangerous time. We don't live in a judocracy. We live in a republic. The limits on government are clear. What the courts are doing today, decision after decision after decision, are in violation of that Constitution. And yet we tolerate it. We elect a Congress. They begged us, give us a chance, we'll fix things. We increased the numbers in the House. We turned the Senate back over to them. And again, broken hearts. And I used to have a radio show, and I loved doing it. Shane had a radio show, and I was on his a couple of times too, and it's a great forum. But I used to spend a lot of time in that radio show trying to educate folks on just judocracy that we tend to live in. One of the greatest threats to this republic today is the out-of-control courts. But folks, you have the ability to fix those through Congress. They have neglected their duties. It's nothing less than malfeasance of office to allow the courts to usurp authority they don't have, to legislate from the bench, to offer opinion, like Thomas Jefferson said, they have the right to have an opinion but no will. They cannot exercise their will from that bench just because they have an opinion. Almost all the latest decisions don't have to do with the law. They don't cite the Constitution or the law. They cite social reform, cultural reforms, tradition. Things have no place in the rule of law. And we've had some major challenges, needless to say, but Article 3 of the United States Constitution, coupled with Article 1, Section 8, Congress has complete control over the appellate courts. Now, here's what happens in general. The left is very good and they're well-funded. They're very good and they're well-funded, but they love to go to the court for decisions because they know the liberal appellate court system will render bad decisions. The Ninth Circuit Court, out of control, the most overturned court in the nation, and that's only because of the few that the Supreme Court takes. Most of those decisions are never taken at the Supreme Court, and so they know that. So then a bad decision will stand because the Supreme Court won't take it. They can't take everything comes at them. And so they stand. They know that. They're very clever and strategic in what they do. It's got to stop, though. The Congress can fix the appellate court system. They can set their jurisdictional limits. They can remove them from office through the impeachment process. Well, they can the U.S. Supreme Court, too, if they would. But they sit idly by and watch them destroy this nation in the separation of powers. Shameful. It's absolutely shameful that we allow that to go on. And again, they want us to put them back in office. They were going to eliminate Obamacare. They were going to stop Common Core. They were going to stop his unconstitutional executive orders for amnesty, direct violation of law. Then you go, and I can go through the whole list. I mean, folks, you got court after court after court doing this. You got a judge here in Maricopa County, Judge Arthur Anderson, who decided the law you passed by 75% of you in 06, called Proposition 300, said no in-state tuition for illegal aliens. None. And federal law says if you're not in the country legally, you cannot be declared a resident. So you have all federal law that also supports that concept. And Arizona passed state law. You passed by 75%. He decided that law no longer is in place because Obama declared the Dreamers to be legal. He didn't change the statute. It's an unconstitutional order from the courts. And yet Judge Anderson decided to uphold that, even the Ninth Circuit Court, and is often referred to as the Ninth Circus Court, even they admitted DACA, the executive order dealing with Dreamers, is unconstitutional, has no standing in law. And yet, recognize that, they still push that. The Ninth Circuit Court ordered Governor Brewer to issue driver's licenses to illegal aliens. Our law forbids it. It's not a national driver's license, it's a state driver's license. The feds have no control over it. It's an order that she should have refused, and she did for a while. But then they caved. It's a violation of law. And I'll tell you, I'll be very bold here. But if I was governor, Kim Davis would have a partner in jail if he has the nerve to come get me. I would not author or authorize or allow a violation of law or an unconstitutional order to take place. You've got to elect people that have the courage to stand up. If they're more worried about being reelected than they are about doing what's right, they don't belong there in the first place. Have to elect warriors. Warriors in defense of liberty. Warriors that will stand up for your rights, your God-given rights. You have a Constitution and a Bill of Rights. I believe it was divinely inspired. And I talk about it often. Folks, I appreciate what Shane does and what Shane does with his children and the message that Shane brings forward on a regular basis. I love our founding fathers. I love the kind of men they were that put together this Constitution and recognized freedom, natural law, God's law, things that are inherent, yours, not given to you by government. They're inherent. They're your rights. They're your natural rights. They're your God-given rights. And they put together a Constitution, a Bill of Rights to protect those. And we elect folks who we expect to fight for those things. I mean, they were given to you by the shedding of blood. I mean, read about the real George Washington, the real Thomas Jefferson, the real Benjamin Franklin. Know about some of the miracles that occurred in the making of America. The Old South Church in Boston. What a great story. The making, the Star-Spangled Banner and what occurred when they were bombarding Fort Henry. And all they had to do was lower that flag, and they would have stopped. They would have stopped. But those men loved freedom so much, they gathered around the base of that flag and held it up. They couldn't understand why it wasn't coming down. They eventually turned all their guns on that flag to bring it down. It still wouldn't come down. As those men were killed and hit by those cannonballs, others drugged them off and took their place at the base of that flag because they knew that lowering that flag meant surrender, and they were not going to surrender. Those are the kind of patriots we need today that understand and cherish freedom. We have them. We have a few of them. But I get a little concerned about the apathy, as most of us talk about and have. But I love this republic. I understand the principles of this republic. And again, I studied our founders. I know our founders. I feel like I know some of them personally. And what great men. I think the greatest compilation of men ever gathered in one place at one time. And it was for a purpose. A nation like no other nation. A republic. And like Benjamin Franklin said, if you can keep it. I wonder about it sometimes. I worry about it all the time. I watch government out of control, taxed, regulated, laws that are just voluminous, freedoms that are ignored. And I tell you, when tyranny shows up, and this is the sad part, I've been in law enforcement 25 years, actually more than that, counting my 7 years at NVD, which has 300 officers also. Board of takes care of all the ports of entry and certain enforcement activities. So probably total almost 30 years just in law enforcement. But when tyranny shows up on your doorstep, it'll probably be in the way of a uniform. And that's why it's so important that you elect folks that understand their constitutional duty. And I say it often, the sheriff is the last line of defense. It is his job to protect you from tyranny. It is his job to stop unconstitutional actions by either the state or the federal government upon the citizens that he's elected to protect. They all have that duty. They all have that duty. But the constitutional officer with a badge has additional responsibility because of that unique position. And that's why the sheriff is so critical that it be elected. Folks, and Sheriff Joe says this all the time, we tease about it, and I was his former chief deputy. I know him better than anybody. And I tell people all the time, I appreciate Sheriff Joe. He was a great student. You know, I taught him everything he knows. And but we tease all the time about it. If he had been appointed by bureaucrats, you think he could have done what he's done today? You think they would let him get away with doing what he does? I can guarantee you not. He would have been fired soon after he took office if he had been appointed. We the people have to take more responsibility to what we're doing. Now, I can tell you we've had some Arizona leads the way in many, many areas. I appreciate the comments made on the Second Amendment. Folks, we are number one, not number two. We're number one in the nation in Second Amendment freedom. Arizona leads the way. What is the group? The guy that was shot with Ronald Reagan outside. Yeah, Brady. The Brady. There's this little group of Brady folks have their little thing. Anyway, we're ranked last again on the Brady list. That means you're number one. So we love freedom. We've expanded, and I appreciate the fact that I'm the author of almost all of those bills. I love freedom, and I fight every day for bills to push the limit on returning to our constitutional founding principles. But we have the castle doctrine inside and outside of your home. We have the freedom to display self-defense. In other words, in the old days, if you showed your gun to somebody in a threatening manner because they were threatening you, and all you're doing is saying, leave me alone, I have a gun, you could go to jail for aggravated assault. We fixed that. You have a right to tell people, leave me alone, and yes, I have a gun, and I'll even show it to you, as long as it's not in a threatening manner that is unneeded. We have that. We have, again, as they call it in Florida, you know, the stand your ground. We have that. In Arizona, again, as mentioned, you don't need government permission to carry a firearm if you're a law-abiding citizen. And again, I tell people, and I've been in law enforcement, and I've got 2 boys in law enforcement, and they understand this principle very well. You know, when seconds count, policemen are only minutes away. If you need a gun and don't have one, you probably won't need it again. And I used to tell law enforcement all the time, the only defense against a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. Nobody has a right to disarm you if you're a law-abiding citizen. Nobody. Who is government to tell you that you have to stand by and watch your family or others be injured or killed because you've been disarmed by government? Let alone the original issue by our founders, and that's to protect yourself against a tyrannical government. It was that you were as well armed as your government. There's reasons for it. Our founders understood that. They just fought, and they all came from countries of tyrannical governments. They understood that issue. Then we got another issue, and it's one I talk about quite often, and that's the illegal immigration issue. Folks, Arizona leads the nation again on that. But we've had a battle. What a battle we've had. I just got through with my 7th lawsuit on 1070. My 7th. I've been deposed several times, and I'm not bragging about it, but I know a lot of those ACLU guys by first name. You know, I know some of the courts better than I ought to know them. 7 times I've been to the Supreme Court on both 1070, employer sanctions, Prop 100, Prop 200. Let me just jump real quick, tell you a cute story. When we were battling with 1070 on the way to the Supreme Court, Governor Brewer, then who loved, took a lot of credit for 1070. I don't think she's ever read it. She certainly never talked to me before she signed it. But anyway, we had talked about going to court. I asked her, in several occasions when there was a chance to speak on it, not to, because she wouldn't tell her right. I said, just call me governor, and because you got to know the bill, you got to know the history, you got to know about it, And so anyway, we was on my Supreme Court, and you get so many seats there, and I was talking to her and her general counsel, and they said, "Oh, Russell, don't worry about it. We've got a seat for you." And they told me that several times. Then when the night before, and I flew out to D.C., and the night before there, I called her chief counsel. He said, and Governor and I, got along on most issues pretty well, but on this one, she was really touchy about not wanting to share credit, which was disappointing. It's not about a credit. I was excited about 1070. I thought we'd have a unanimous decision by the court. I was excited to be there, and they tell me I don't have a seat. So I was a little disappointed, but tell you the rest of the story. Good friend of mine, Congressman Steve King from Iowa, a patriot, a Christian, a man who has both courage and morality. And anyway, he happened to call me that night because he wanted to go to breakfast the next morning early. And he says, "I'll see you, and then let's go to breakfast early in the morning, Buster, and from there we'll go on over to the court." I said, "Well, Congressman, I don't have a seat. So I have to stand in line early, so I may need to skip breakfast because I need to get in line really early." And he really got excited, said, "You don't have a seat?" He said, "Hang on." And he hangs up the phone. He called me back about 45 minutes later. He said, "I just got off the phone." This was late at night. This was about 10 o'clock when he called me back. "I just got off the phone with Judge Roberts. He said, you have a seat, you show up, and you'll be seated in the front." And he said, "So I want you to know that." And I thought, wow. Now, I'm not happy with his decision. He sided with the leftists, but that was awesome. It was just a neat experience to have the Supreme Court Chief Justice guarantee me a place at the table. But anyway, I was disappointed. And the media would have you believe all of 1070 was shot down. It's not the case. 10 of the 13 sections of 1070 were upheld. 10 of the 13 sections. The most critical sections were upheld, 2B especially, which was compelling language that eliminated the battle going on today. Sanctuary cities in Arizona, it's not only against federal law, 8 U.S.C. 1644, 1373. It's against Arizona law in 11-1051, which is part of 1070, to have a policy that limits or restricts law enforcement from doing their job. Now, I believe in handcuffs. I've been in law enforcement a long time. I believe handcuffs are a great tool if you get them on the right people. Take them off law enforcement, put them on the bad guy. They have a right to enforce your laws. It is the law. It's the law. It's illegal to enter this country without permission, without the proper paperwork, without the authority. It's illegal. I mean, why aren't the mayors and the governors around this country going to jail for violating the law? It's in direct violation of the law. But yet we'll put Kim Davis in jail for violating a judge's orders that is contrary to the law. There is no statutory provision for what he did. There's no constitutional provision for what he did. And she goes to jail without a trial, without a hearing. And yet, these mayors and cities are violating the law. Why is nobody filing a paper against them? Why aren't they ordered to enforce the law? Why aren't they held in contempt for their failure to enforce the law? Because we have a government that's decided what role they want to play in your lives, and it's gone so far left. We have a liberal judiciary. And it is, again, and I'll say it is one of the greatest threats we have to this republic. It's got to be reined in. Congress can rein them in. We've passed some other good laws, too. I love talking about some because we shook the country up. A simple little bill we passed in 200, you passed. I had the opportunity to write it, and I'll tell you just a quick story about it. Proposition 200, 2004. We had sent a bill to your governor. By the way, we deported her, Napolitano. And so anyway, but we sent a little bill to Napolitano. Simply ID at the polls. Simply ID. Didn't have to do a citizenship. I had a stronger bill headed that direction. She vetoed the bill about ID at the polls. Thought it was too big of a burden for people to show you ID when they go to vote. So we knew where she'd be at on the tougher bill. So we created a committee. I called people into my office. There were four folks. Kathy McKee, Rusty Childress, and Majority Leader, I'm old. Good friend of mine from Tucson. Anyway, I called those in. There were four of them sitting in my office. I said, we have no money. There's never been a proposition, an initiative, I should say, passed in the state of Arizona without funding. It's a big hurdle. I don't know if we can raise the money, but I know we have an active electorate out there that knows the right thing. And the ballot initiative will be simply about proof of citizenship before you can register to vote. Novel idea. I thought our founders had decided that some time back. But no other state had done it. No other state. Jeez, that's simple. We know we got voter fraud everywhere, and we don't require you to be a citizen, to show me some evidence that you are. So if you just have ID at the polls and no proof of citizenship, then when you show up to the polls to vote, all I'm doing is verifying you're the guy that signed up illegally to vote, but that's who you are, so go ahead and vote. You know, and so that was a critical component of Prop 200. So it was simply proof of citizenship to register to vote, ID at the polls, and no public benefits, taxpayer benefits for those in the country illegally. You passed it overwhelmingly. And then your governor, Napolitano, along with the help of Terry Goddard, your attorney general, decided it was not enforceable in certain aspects. And they said the welfare part wasn't enforceable at all. It only applied to 4 little minor state programs. An executive order she issues based on that illegal, non-binding opinion, that basically neutered that part of Prop 200. Now we've been to court umpteen times on Prop 200. Folks, it's sad. The lineup that fought me on all of this stuff will be surprised. The Chamber of Corruption, the Arizona Chamber of Commerce, they fought me. The ACLU, Chicanos por la Casa. You know, I got a long list. Contractors Association. Why in the world? First of all, we weren't even going after cheap labor. We're talking about voting, register proof of citizenship, ID at the polls, and no public benefits, no welfare. Why would I have the contractors going after me? Why would I have the Arizona Chamber of Commerce going after me, funding this lawsuit? I understand the ACLU. There's never been an American they've had any respect for, or a law. You know, I understand the SPLC, the Southern Poverty Law Center, you know, the most left, they're probably more left than the ACLU. I understand Chicanos por la Casa. I understand some of those organizations where they're at. They've never been associated. In fact, I think they probably are opposed to being associated with Americans. But anyway, I understand where they're at. But those other organizations, unbelievable. They fought us. We went to the Supreme Court eventually. And again, I think I was to court, federal court, 8 different suits dealing with Prop 200. Again, I've spent more time in court than I've spent with my 18 grandchildren probably. And it gets old, but they upheld Prop 200 except with a caveat. They said if you use the state form, you can require citizenship, but if you use the federal form, you can't ask for proof of citizenship. The federal law doesn't prevent you from doing that. It's another bad decision. We've always passed laws that strengthen federal law, even when it's an exclusive area for them. We've never been limited or preempted from doing that. You know, and the federal law didn't preclude that. They just set minimum standards, but yet they said we couldn't do that in a federal form. The nice thing is about 95% of everybody that registers to vote in the state of Arizona uses the state form, and you must show proof of citizenship. And if you use the federal form, you may only vote in the federal elections. And so I was grateful for that, and I worked with Tom Horn on that to make that happen. But it's been a battle, and it continues to be a battle. And then we passed, again, in 06, you passed Proposition 100, no bond for illegal aliens who commit serious crime. One of the factors for no bond is flight risk. You see, if you're in the country illegally, there's a good chance you may not have a real good reason to stay here if you're facing felony charges. But yet the Ninth Circuit Court decided that's not good enough. And so they overturned Prop 100 after it was in effect for 9 years. And let me tell you why that was so important. In Maricopa County, 92% of those booked on serious felony charges, not just talking about minor charges, they all ought to be deported. Illegals are illegal. But the point is, this only targeted the really bad guys. In Maricopa County, the courts were releasing on bond or on their own recognizance 92% of illegal aliens booked on serious felony charges. 92%. Enough is enough. And when we stopped that, the impact on violent crime was significant across Maricopa County. Nobody wants to talk about that, and you don't read it in the paper. And then we passed Proposition 102, and again, I wrote all 4 of these and proud of it. But Proposition 102 was a small tort reform. Simply said, if you're illegally in the country, sue an American citizen, you cannot get a Cadillac out of it. You can be made whole, but no punitive damages. Now, that's fair. I would have gone farther, but at least we wanted to make sure you were not enriched by going after American citizens in these frivolous, because we know the lawsuits out there are frivolous and many. Every commercial on TV almost is some lawyer telling you how you get rich and you have right to somebody else's money. You know, they're the best tool you have for wealth redistribution. But anyway, then you pass Proposition 103. English as the official language. Wow. I thought we always were supposed to speak English. You know, during our founders, the debate was English and German, and by one vote, you speak English versus Germany. So the decision was really made, but it wasn't put into a constitution or in statute the way it ought to be. So America really has no official language, even though we all know it's English. But in Arizona, English is the official language. And you ought to read it sometimes. It's very clear, and it violates their time. You shouldn't have to push 1 to get English. The law is very clear. So anyway, and then you pass Proposition 300, we talked about briefly, for no in-state tuition for illegal aliens. The DREAM Act. We said no to the DREAM Act. You passed those 4 propositions by 75% average. That's a majority of every single demographic. Every single demographic. Do you know 60% of Hispanics voted for those? And yet every time you listen to the paper or the media, you'd think that the Hispanics are not on our side. On those issues, they are. The problem with polls are the 23 million that are in this country illegally also get to participate in those polls. So, of course, they're not on our side. But the American Hispanics who have worked here, whose families been here for the most part, the majority are on our side. And so must quit pandering to folks. We stand for something. We stand for the rule of law. We don't apologize for being an American. Then in 2007, I wrote employer sanctions again. And I love this one because the left always come at me, Russell, you're always picking on the poor illegal alien, you know, you never pick on the employers. And I said, you have a good point. So I wrote the employer sanction bill. Mandatory E-Verify. Mandatory, not permissive, and penalties. In fact, the Los Angeles Times wrote an article which I loved that said, Arizona has just issued the death warrant for businesses. No, just for cheaters. If you knowingly hire illegal aliens, you have the risk of losing your business license as a provision of doing business in the state of Arizona. Well, it protects the honest businessman from the dishonest businessman. It protects jobs for Americans that are being stolen by folks that have no business having that job. It's a felony to hire them under federal law. Again, not only constitutional, but common sense. And I've been to court on that one, and that was upheld by the Supreme Court too in a 5-4 decision. Sued by the same group of people that sued us on Prop 200. So it's been a long fight, in a fight that I'm glad to take on. And I want to give a shout out, if you will, to Judicial Watch. How many of you are familiar with Judicial Watch? They have spent literally hundreds of thousands of dollars defending me on every one of those cases. Deposition after deposition, interrogatory after interrogatory, response, threats of contempt. Oh, Judge Bolton's, she's been threatening to put me in jail for a long time. I've offered myself up. I told her I'm welcome to go. Just should have watched, always tell me, Russell, no, we don't want to make her mad. I said, I just want to be compliant. I'm not going to comply with the law, but if she wants to take me to jail, I'll show up, tell me where. I'll take my best book and my teddy bear, get a little rest. It's not a bad place. I used to run a jail, and I know Sheriff Joe very well. I've been promised a tent with a view. So, I'm not afraid of that place, Anyway, there's just times you have to stand up. You can't let these courts run over us. And all these laws, just like the marriage law, 34 states passed constitutional amendments to preserve marriage, the traditional marriage between a man and a woman. And the Supreme Court, no place in the Constitution talks about marriage. There's no authority for them to act. And yet they decided to run over states' rights. They violated the 9th and 10th Amendments. They violated the Article 3 of the United States Constitution. It's illegal what they did. It's impeachable for what they did. Whether you agree or disagree with it, it's a states' rights issue. I'll debate the other issue too, but right